morning, Sister Joan Mary.
Good morning.
Please clear up it for my mind and maybe others too. Today we are burying Sister Joan Mary Dwyer. Have you two gotten mixed up through the years?
I know who I am. I have never gotten mixed up. However, our mail has gotten mixed up, and many people on campus are mixed up because it's very common for people to say to me, Joan Mary what?
Exactly.
Because they're still looking for a last name.
And Mary is your last name.
Mary is the last name.
And where did that come from? Where did that, what's the nationality?
Well, actually, the name is Mare, and it comes from the French. However, in Canada, on the graves in Canada, it is spelled M-A-R-Y. And over in Alsace, I believe that it might have a different spelling. Mm-hmm. But as far as our family knows, we're M-A-R-Y.
That's a beautiful name.
It is
Joan,
a beautiful name. It is a beautiful name.
Joan, I'm wondering, did you have a map in your hand when you came out of the womb? A map of the world?
No.
Did you have any idea of the world that you would see or have seen in these last several years?
Not at all. Not at all. I never pictured myself going to many places. Mm-hmm. Even Adrian, I never pictured.
Well, how did you come to know Adrian?
Well, I was in my junior year, between my junior and senior year of high school.
Where is this?
In Buffalo, New York.
Oh.
I was out at a camp for children, St. Vincent de Paul Camp for Children in Aurora. And I was there helping. I was the camp secretary, and I was helping at night in the clinic. So I was helping the nurse put Band-Aids on owies and swab throats and little things like this. And Sister Janine Therese Annette McGorry, was also there, but I didn't know her until I met her in the camp clinic. At night she was there, and we became friends. She was a counselor, and we were talking, and I shared with her that I had a aunt who was a Franciscan over at Williamsville. And she said, you ought to come to our house, and my father drives our sisters over to Williamsville for free movies on Friday night. So I always say, God caught me with free movies. I got on the bus in Buffalo, went to the end of the line. Mr. McGorry and Janine were there. They picked me up, took me over to Mother of Divine Grace Convent in Cheektowaga, and the front door opened, and these sisters came out in these beautiful white habits, laughing and talking, and they filled their car, and the others came with us in our car, and we went over to see the movie, but I was totally taken with their joy and their happiness, and I thought, whatever group this is, this is the group for me.
Well, Janine Therese, is that right, Jean Therese?
That's right, Janine
was
Therese.
she an Adrian Dominican also?
Yes, she was. Mm-hmm. At that time, she had been back in Buffalo, sent by Mother Gerald. I always felt that she was sent to get me because I wouldn't have ever met the Dominicans. But she came home for a short time, and she recovered. And
she had been sick. Is that why she was
That's
home?
right.
Mm-hmm.
And she went back I went to Adrian in June of 1955, and she came in August. and I was a postulant. She went right into the novitiate. And so that's how I met the Dominicans. It was a wonderful gift and surprise.
Yes. My mother used to say, join the Dominicans and see the world. So from 1955, 22 years later, you find yourself, and how did you ever get there, in Ghana, Africa?
That's right. I was working in Cleveland we were living at Hoban Dominican, the St. Henry Sisters in Hoban. And at that time, our Sister Rosemary had gone over to an international meeting.
Sister Rosemary Ferguson?
That's correct. That's correct. And she came back and she shared her impression of the fact that sisters in Africa were longing to have their own sisters educated in their congregations. And that was expressed to her in such a way that she wrote a letter to all of us and said, we aren't missionaries like the Maryknoll sisters, but wouldn't it be wonderful if we could go and help educate, because we are educators. And I thought that was just wonderful, and that some college sister ought to go and volunteer someone with a high degree.
And teach them philosophy.
That's
mathematics.
Right. But I was very excited about it. However, word came in a short time afterward that not many had volunteered to go. And I felt, oh, if everybody thought the way I thought, to let somebody else do it, it'll never get done.
Oh,
and so then I wrote a letter to volunteer.
And where did you land in Ghana? Is that?
I did.
Yes.
I did.
With whom?
With Durstein Farnan, Dusty,
Yeah.
right. And we were to originally go to Malawi to join our sisters in Malawi that were there. In fact, all of our books had gone ahead of us when word came that the parish council and the bishop were at a different stage, and he felt that we should delay. And then a white father, famous Father McCoy, came from northern Ghana to our mother house and asked Sister Rosemary and Sister Mary Therese McCarthy, did we have any sisters? That he needed sisters up in northern Ghana. And so that's how
Dusty.
we landed there.
Oh,
Right.
How did you know what to teach them?
Well,
These are the sisters.
Yes.
What was the name of the congregation?
They were the Assumption Sisters of Eldoret.
So as far as teaching them, did you start with the ABCs or?
Yes, no, excuse me, I made a mistake with this name. We went to the Sisters of Mary Immaculate.
Okay.
The Assumption Sisters came second.
Okay.
So actually, it was the most perfect situation for a teacher. We didn't have to follow a syllabus, state required or country required. We simply asked the sisters what they would like to learn. And many of them expressed, we would like to know how to balance finances and books with a balance sheet. So we started there. What we were actually doing in all of our teaching was we were bridging the gap in education between the younger sisters who had gone to secondary school and the older sisters of the congregation, the senior sisters who had not had that privilege. And so we taught bookkeeping in that way. And then they wanted to know how to learn typing. And this was the most extraordinary class because they had nothing electrical. And so the typewriters had no erasers on them, no
whiteout.
whiteouts, nothing like this. And but it was fascinating because we had typing books, old-fashioned Gregg typing books, and they became so sharp with the typing. They very seldom made an error because there were no erasers to cross out and do over. So they knew they'd have to start a new sheet of paper, so they became perfect typists. And it was an unusual situation. They were so concentrated on learning that even with the doors open and a chicken walking through the typing class, it made no difference. People concentrated on their typing.
They were like sponges, weren't they? Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the other course I really enjoyed teaching was teaching the sisters how to be a teacher of religion in the schools, the bush schools. So it was so creative. We made the syllabus in the classroom. What did we want to teach? And we prepared songs and stories and how to begin. And they made a lesson plan for the first time. And then we went down to the bush school.
What do you mean by the bush school?
Meaning that it had, it was a hut. It didn't have windows as we know it. They were just open with a thatched roof. And they were in the bush.
A dirt floor, no doubt.
Dirt floor.
Did they have desks?
No, they sat on long benches, wooden benches. And when they went to write, they would, some of the writing was done with a stick in the sand, in the ground. So they did mathematics that way, and they printed their letters that way. So it was a unique.
So you brought the sisters to the bush school, and they went by grades, or?
They went by grades.
Groups.
They divided up, and I would be outside, and then I would see other children that didn't have the privilege of going to school yet. They were still home with their parents, and education is so valued.
Well, why weren't they at school?
They didn't have shoes, and that was the requirement. They had to have some type of shoes to go to school. So even if it was flip-flops, it was a requirement. So you could often see those children coming with their water on their head, and they were sent by their mother, but they would walk by the school and stand and look in the window for a few minutes, and just education was so appreciated that they tried to get some little kernel of what was being taught that day.
Oh my. How long were you in Ghana, you and Dusty?
I was in Ghana. We were both there 3 years. Yes.
And did you ever go back to Africa after that?
Yes, I did. When we were in Ghana, first of all, we went over to Nigeria to see the Dominicans. Those were the closest Dominican fathers were there. And but on the way home, we went down to Malawi, and we visited our sisters.
Is that where Catherine Deutsch and Helen Dillon and?
They were in actually in Kenya.
Oh, they were.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
they were in Kenya,
Mm-hmm.
and we did see them after. We went to Zambia also to look at a religious community. Our congregation was very intent on teaching women. We felt that the men had many occasions to get education, whereas women did not. So even in those days, there was a great concentration on what could we do for the women, especially for the women religious in the church. After Zambia, we came home, and I was at Aquinas High School, And I was hoping to give back
Yeah.
to the African American women there at Aquinas. They had other interests like boyfriends and the soap operas.
And not the books.
And not the, well, especially not Africa. I did a little sharing. Probably the older girls, juniors and seniors, had more of an interest than freshmen and sophomores. But at that point, then I was at Aquinas. When I left it, it was a question of where to go next, and I would have had to study. Probably social work was my interest, but in order to do that, I would have to close the door to the possibility of ever returning to Africa.
Wow.
And I just wasn't able to do that yet. And so when the call came to go to Kenya, Joanne Peters and I went to language school in Tanzania. And we were there 3 months in Musoma. And then we crossed the border and went up to Kenya. And it was there that we saw Catherine Deutsch and Helen Dillon.
And Barb Hubbard, was it?
Right, right. Barb Hubbard and Carol Jean McDonald were down in Malawi, and we had seen them at in preparation. We thought we would be with that group originally, but we were not with that group. They were in Malawi. Our books were in Malawi, but we never got to work there.
Well, in Kenya, did you live with the sisters that you were teaching?
Yeah, always we lived whatever the sisters would provide. We never built a building because it was the idea of mission that we were not permanent residents, but that we were committed to empower the local church.
It's beautiful.
And the sisters. So we did not seek vocations from the sisters' communities or local area wherever we were working, but we were trying to enable the sisters to be the leaders there. And for both congregations, they were independent by the time we came, and we lived among them, whatever they provided, and ate there with them. And we had our cook and they had their cook because we didn't have electricity as such. So the women in Ghana would bring down the wood that was purchased in the market, and it would all come on their head as they came down the road. And then our cook with a machete would chop the wood and put it in this wood stove. And so
Did you ever bake in that stove?
Yes, I
Really?
didn't personally bake, but I taught Simon how to bake bread because we didn't have bread, and but we could get flour. And I thought it was totally amazing that he could be so accurate to bake this beautiful bread, and he had no gauge to 350 or 450 or anything. It's
Quite amazing.
It is amazing.
Did you ever meet our sister Emmy?
Sister Emmy Chogi
Yes.
was just coming to the Assumption Sisters when we were preparing to go. And
But you had met her before.
yes, I did meet her before,
Yes.
and I'm thrilled that
Yes.
she's with us.
Yes, we're very blessed. It's unfortunately their loss and our gain, as we would say. Joan Mary, tell me, is your heart still there in Africa?
Well, I think yes,
Yes,
in
yes.
many ways. You know, you leave Africa, it never leaves you.
Yeah.
And you meet missionaries that have been there, and there's an immediate bonding. And of course, any African, the conversation just starts immediately. Where are you? Where do you live? Where are you from?
So you learned several African dialects while you were ministering there.
Yes, we started out with Lowbury, and we were Dusty and I went to Our Lady of Sorrows in Farmington because there was a former white sister, Shirley Schenkel, who's still a friend of mine, and she would come over to Our Lady of Sorrows in the morning, and we would have class. We were having Lowbury class there every day while we waited for our passports to come through and our paperwork. And she was teaching us. They didn't even have a bound copy of Lowbury. It was a dialect of northern Ghana, and she was teaching us from this typed out format that the missionaries had put together, and it was even tied together in such a way that it would hold together. That was our
Your
text.
manual.
Yes.
Your learning.
But
learning
later,
tool.
when we got to Ghana, the bishop was Dagaba, and he wanted us to learn Dagati. Lowbury, he could hear us, and where did you learn this language? And he said, you need to learn Dagaba. It's a larger tribe, and so we did.
Are there any messages or a message or a word that you could give to our sister Emmy in the dialect that she'd be familiar with?
Well, I think for Emmy, I'd have to say, Habari Gani.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
What an experience.
Yeah.
You've blessed us in the last few years with your ministry in our literacy center, and I know you ministered in Chicago in the literacy center, but you're leaving campus now for something brand new. Would you tell us about your new adventure? It's going to be in Chicago, isn't it?
Yes, it's. I've volunteered. I felt called to volunteer to be part of this new initiative to establish intercongregational Dominican communities where young women from Hearts of Fire who have requested to live in community and our common novitiate women who want to live in community and go out for ministry there or go to theological schools, or, for instance, in Chicago, Loyola Med for CPE, that there would be a house established for community life, and they could go out from that house. They would receive the kind of support that we received as young women when we were in large groups entering the congregation. And this is a new initiative that we're all excited about because the different communities of Dominican women, we must have about 9 in the Chicago area. And so the women from these congregations would be free to choose and join to live in this house. There will be other houses, for instance, Houston, perhaps New Orleans, Cleveland. And this is an initiative that is just starting. And
Does it have a name?
I believe that it's called the Intercongregational Dominican Initiative for Community Life.
Oh, yes. So you're going to be a pioneer in that. And
I'm going to help get a house in readiness, whatever that means.
well, you will be missed. And
Thank you. Thank you.
again, you could put so many pins on that global map that came with you from birth, because we didn't even mention your time in a short time in Amsterdam, Panama, Bogota, Dominican Republic, Greece, Turkey, and the lands of Dominic. And finally back to Chicago.
Right.
We left Buffalo out of the picture.
We did.
Yes. Do you have any words for Emmy in English now, for the rest of her professional and religious life here in the congregation?
Well, Emmy is a beautiful person, and I think that she will go forth and respond as God calls her. She already has answered God's call, and in Spanish, we would say, ándale. We would say, go ahead, go forward.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Joan.